Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So if you watched my latest video, my January 2024 reading wrap up, you may have gotten a little hint about what this video is going to be about. Or you could just, read the title. But today we are going to be talking all about Ira Levin's Rosemary's Baby. I hope I'm saying that right. I know it might be Ira, could be Ira Levin. I've met people named Ira before, but I don't know how to spell it, so I don't know. It could be Ira Levin, and I'm just absolutely butchering that. But yes, we are here to talk about one of the most iconic, beloved, famously a film-adapted horror novels of all time, and that is Rosemary's Baby. Now, I love the film. I think the film is absolutely fantastic, directed by Roman Polanski, starring Mia Farrow, shot at the iconic Dakota building here in New York City. Absolutely enthralled with that movie. It is so beautiful and scary and sinister, and the acting is just incredible. So I was definitely a little worried when reading the book because I wanted it to live up to how much I love that film. And I touched on this in my last video, but I have definitely read a lot of famous novels that have been adapted into films before. Most recognizably, Silence of the Lambs, Hellbound Heart, and The Shining. And I have many thoughts on all of those, but for the films that are the most faithful to the novel, such as Silence of the Lambs and Hellbound Heart, especially because, Clive Barker had his hand in both the film and the novel, I feel like I kind of was disappointed reading the stories because they were just such copy and pasted, which meant that I wasn't blown away by anything. There was no big revelations for me. I knew the stories, and I'm not saying that they're bad at all. They are fantastic reads, and the stories are iconic and so well done, but I'm always so excited for a book to be better than a film. And both of those books do have more details in them. So they're not as good as the film, but they are as good as the film in my opinion, because they really are just the same story kind of copy and pasted into a different format. Not even going to touch The Shining because we know that there's a very good chance Stanley Kubrick probably didn't even read that book. They're so vastly different. I feel like a better read would be to compare Dr. Sleep's film adaptations, because Mike Flanagan, love Mike Flanagan, did such an amazing job of translating the source material into some kind of semblance of a story that could also be seen as a direct sequel to Stanley Kubrick's film. Very great idea. But with Rosemary's Baby, I really wanted this book to live up to how much I love the film, and I am so happy to say the book is better than the film. I almost said so much better, but it's not so much better. The film is a very loyal, almost word for word adaptation of the book. However, I do think that the ending of the book, though it's pretty much the same, by being more detailed is more satisfying. And my favorite thing about the book that you do not get in the film is the book is so deeply inside Rosemary's head that you get so much more from Rosemary by reading the book. Something that you couldn't really translate on screen without inner monologues, and I'm happy they didn't do that. So really thrilled with the book. I'm going to read the back of the book just in case you were here on this channel and you're interested in reading Rosemary's Baby and you've never seen the film and you don't 100% know what it's about. So here we go. The genre-defining classic that ushered in the era of modern horror. One of the best-selling books of all time, Rosemary's Baby is a foundational work of suspense and psychological horror, which remains as powerful and chilling as the day it was written. Hailed by Truman Capote as a darkly brilliant tale and adapted with near total fidelity into the monumental film starring Mia Farrow and John Cassavetes, Ira Levin's Rosemary's Baby ushered in the era of contemporary horror as we know it, opening the floodgates to later works such as The Exorcist and The Omen. Levin ingeniously fused Gothic literary tradition with modern-day New York, creating an enduring classic which the New York Times placed on its recent list of the 25 most significant New York City novels from the last 100 years. Rosemary Woodhouse and her struggling actor-husband Guy are thrilled to move into the Bramford, a sought-after Manhattan apartment building prized for its Victorian details and gargoyled facade. Yet, as they learn of a darker side to the building's history and become acquainted with their overly attentive neighbors, the Cassavetes, unspoken tensions enter into the young couple's relationship. Matters improve when Guy lands a major role and Rosemary at last becomes pregnant. But as her pregnancy takes frightening turns, Rosemary begins to question if her neighbor's heightened interest is strictly innocent, or if their motivations and those of Guy himself portend terrifying consequences for her and her unborn child. Is Rosemary going mad or going sane? This is such a good story. I don't want to make this video a review because I don't necessarily think I need to review one of the most famous horror novels of all time. Regardless of my opinions on this book, I feel like the audience that is going to read it is going to find this book. Personally, I do believe that this was a 5-star read. I think it was absolutely fantastic. I was actually stunned that this novel is written by a man, primarily because it is so, in a way, sympathetic to our female lead, and you really get very deeply into our lead's mind. And she is very much tortured and battered by a lot of pigeonholed roles that women are believed to play. Back in like the 1960s, her role in society, her role as a wife, her role as a future mother, she gets really trapped by societal expectations, and I think Levin is able to just so gracefully talk about the problems with those gender roles without ever actually saying so. And it's that kind of conversation which makes the ending of this story, like I said in my last video, this kind of let the right one in paradox, where you could read it as this kind of happy yet morbid ending, but you could also read it as this very terrifying, depressing, depraved ending, based on kind of the navigation and manipulation of our antagonists. And I think it's really, really interesting because that's one of those things that the film touches upon, but doesn't kind of snowball you with the type of information that you get at the ending of this novel. There's so much more. One of the things that I think is so iconic is that in the film, we never know what this baby looks like. In the book, we do. And I don't really want to talk more on that beyond, because I just really don't want to ruin this book or this film if you've never seen it or read it before. But I really, really appreciated the fact that the book does get more descriptive. I think that that adds to the horror, but I also am so happy that it's something that doesn't happen on screen, because it's one of those things that still, if it's left to your imagination, I feel like is more terrifying, but also allows in the novel for you to have more of like a sliding scale of how tragic versus happy the ending is. I think that's a really, really interesting way to do it. I absolutely adore the setting. I adore the setting. I've always wanted to go into the Dakota. You can't. And they filmed it in the Dakota. And they even talk about how the Bramford is like similar to the Dakota. Obviously it's, you know, not the Dakota. But I just imagined the setting from the film in my head the whole time, and it paired so well with how the book is describing the building. It's just this like massive, opulent 4-bedroom apartment overlooking like Central Park in this like gorgeous Gothic gargoyle topped building. If you've read Nestlings by Nat Cassidy, you can really see how much Nat Cassidy pulled from Rosemary's Baby to write this. I think this is a far inferior novel. I didn't love it as a story overall, but I did really appreciate the setting and all of the nods to Rosemary's Baby inside of it, but it just doesn't live up to the iconic Rosemary's Baby. However, I really want to read more horror stories set in like Gothic New York upper class apartment buildings. I don't know if more of those exist, but I think the setting is so unique and beautiful, and it's kind of like the English countryside manner of like New York, like, and I want more of it. The setting was just to die for. Another thing that I think is absolutely amazing is obviously we have these kind of overly attentive neighbors that are kind of pushing a lot of things forward. But I think the real villain in Rosemary's Baby is her husband. I think it's something that the film does a very good job of showing, that the book kind of alludes to very, very early on. But I think kind of really, again, getting inside Rosemary's head, we see so much more of the gaslighting. We see so much more of the abandonment. We see so much more of, like, the depth of his lies and manipulation and his self-centeredness. He is just such a horrible, horrible, horrible husband, even before everything bad starts to happen. Like, and that's something that I also saw in Nestlings, is I feel like our main characters in Nestlings aren't the greatest people either, and the husband kind of starts off okay and then, like, unravels into madness. However, with Nestlings, I also think that the wife in that story was also very, very problematic. Rosemary isn't innocent. She's this 24-year-old wide-eyed girl from Omaha, Nebraska, being dragged into, like, New York City upper class. She's middle class, but she's getting dragged into this kind of upper class society world, which was a big thing back in, like, the 40s, 50s, 60s of, like, New York City. Where you lived was important. And she's trying to navigate this new world. She's married to, like, this up-and-coming actor. Like, she's on the cusp of breaking into a different social norm. And she's never experienced anything like that before. So she's navigating this world she doesn't understand. She's in a new position as a new wife, in a new building, with new neighbors, in a new city. You know, she has all of these kind of new things, and now she's about to be a new mother. And she's so innocent that it's so easy for all of these people around her to take such advantage of her. And all the characterizations of Rosemary just paint her as this very, very wide-eyed, innocent girl. And as the story progresses, you start to see her grow and develop to be a stronger female lead, a more protective female lead. And she really does become part of that mother, like, mama bear role. And I really, really loved that. But it does take a while to get there. And her transition is very, very sympathetic. And it's very hard, and you just feel so bad for this woman. But she does start to piece things together. She has help, and I think the help is warranted because what she's dealing with is absolutely, like, batshit bonkers. But she holds her own with it in the end, and I think that's very, very, very important, because otherwise this is just a story about a woman being gaslit and put down and having horrible things happen to her. It does have this kind of feminist edge to it, where we are seeing that she is this very strong, individual, independent woman in a very unfortunate situation and how she deals with it. And again, the fact that it's written by a man, I was really, really stunned by. But yes, I loved this novel. I thought it was so, so strong, and it's such a product of its time. Again, I touched on this earlier, and I touched on this in my last video, but the gender roles of the 1960s are very questionable. You know, you can tell that she had a job and then got married, so she gave up her job. There's this scene where her husband just wakes her up because he wants her to make him breakfast, and she's not feeling good because she's had a horrible, horrible, horrible night the night before, and he's waking her up and he's like, you need to make me breakfast. I'm not going to work without breakfast. And it's just like, oh my God, you heartless, like, insufferable bastard, because, you know, that's kind of what he is. And she gets up and she does it. And you just feel so horrible, because that's what's expected of her, because she does get to stay home and she doesn't have to work. But he is so cruel to her at times, you know. There's this scene where she's reading a book and he doesn't like what she's reading, so he just throws it away, you know. And it's just like, how was that acceptable back then? And then you can kind of compare her to her neighbors, Minnie and Roman. And in that marriage, Minnie definitely still has some of the same kind of gendered roles as Rosemary does, but she also has this higher sense of independence. And she definitely does kind of carry herself in a more confident light than Rosemary does. So you do get to see this kind of juxtaposition of this, like, newlywed woman trying to find her way versus somebody who's been married for years and years and years and years and years, kind of already adapted to what needs to be done and how she needs to carry herself through situations. And you find out that she has put herself in a pretty good seat in a pretty good, like, seat of power on her own. So I do appreciate that. But again, this story is definitely a very, very tragic story about the exploitation of the female body. And I think it does a really, really good job of telling this narrative without just completely removing all power from our female lead. I think it really shows how she was able to be taken advantage of, and then also builds up how she is able to, in a sense, like, reclaim herself. And I really, really love that. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about this story is knowing the story going into it. I was able to read this book and just be like, oh, I see what's being laid out. I see how this is truly a terrifying story. But you really don't get to any of, like, the supernatural elements until the very, very end. A lot of what makes this story scary is, again, just the way that humans treat this woman for the first 3/4 of the novel. Nothing really supernatural is happening in the foreground. There's definitely stuff happening in the background, but the horror is all human-based situations. It's all things that could and do happen in reality versus, of course, the last quarter of the book, which is heavily, heavily, heavily supernatural influenced, and therefore what's going to qualify this as a horror novel, even though the entirety of the story is absolutely terrifying. You could take away the supernatural elements of this and it would still be very much a horror story rooted in reality because of how Rosemary is treated and her relationship with her husband. It is a very, very toxic, awful relationship, and very, very sad. But again, the ending is such a paradox because you can look at it and it can be a very positive ending, or you can look at it and it can be a very bleak, depraved, depressing ending. And I feel like when I watched the movie, I sided more with the bleak and depraved ending. But reading the book, I do see it as this kind of happy ending. It's not the greatest situation in the world, but we do have a woman who has now kind of put herself in this, like, position of power, finally taken control of her situation, and it might not be the greatest thing in the world, but I mean, is it a step up from where she would be otherwise? I don't know. I don't know. There's definitely this weird positive angle that I wasn't expecting with this book. Anyways, I definitely recommend reading this novel. I definitely recommend watching the film. You can definitely do it in either order, but honestly, maybe read the book and then watch the film, just because we want books to shine. But yeah, 5-star reads. I understand why everybody loves this novel so much. It reads very, very modern. Again, there's definitely some, like, references that are of the times, and there's definitely social norms that are of the times, but the language still feels very, very contemporary to today. Really easy to read, and it's pretty short. It was like, what, 230 something pages. I devoured this book. I read it in 3 days. I would have read it faster if I didn't have to go to work. But amazing story. I definitely hope to read more from Levin. I know there's a sequel to this novel. I don't know if I've heard many good things about it, though. And he wrote Stepford Wives, so I should probably read that as well. But yes, definitely give this a chance if you were looking for it. And the New York setting is just top-notch. I love the New York setting in this story. Very feminist literature as well. And if you did enjoy Nestlings, this is what inspired it. So, have to give credit to the original source material. Also, I will hopefully be getting this up in the next like week or two. I will be doing a cocktail video on vodka blushes. Ever since I saw the film, I've been making vodka blushes. I have a whole history on how I came up with the vodka blush. Reading the story and reaffirming, like, what I knew about the cocktail and, like, the very small clues that we have, I think I have a very good recipe for that. So definitely be on the lookout for that. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. And if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah!